Welcome back, dear listeners, to Pleasure Principles, the podcast where we talk about the things most people whisper about, but we do it with heart, humor, and honesty. Today's conversation goes right to the core of modern intimacy. When you share nudes or explicit material in a relationship, what happens to that consent when the relationship ends? Is it automatically revoked? Or does context change the rules? And what does it say about how we view trust, ownership, and vulnerability in the digital spaces? Well, joining me today is someone who doesn't just talk about the intimacy, she teaches people how to live it. So please welcome my guest, Mandy Hart. Hey, Mandy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, dear listeners, before we delve deep into the discussion, I'd quickly love to introduce you with Mandy. So, Mandy is a certified sexologist and founder of Heart's Desire, Intimacy, and Relationship Coaching. She blends behavioral science, trauma informed somatic work, and the real talk to help people untangle the shame and reclaim the desire. So, her message is so simple: you are not broken, you are human. So let's dive into the conversation that sits at the crossroads of consent, digital culture, and the pleasure. Because pleasure is not just about the sex, it's all about agency, safety, and the stories that we tell ourselves when things ends. So, Mandy, in today's world, like people exchange intimate photos as a kind of sign of trust, closeness, even the playfulness as well. But when a relationship ends, that same image can feel like kind of tickling the time bomb. So, in your view, does consent for sharing or kind of possessing explicit material end automatically when the relationship does? What do you think?
So, I think really it's between partners or whoever it is that's sharing the photos. It's for them to decide
Mm.
because if it's not an explicit conversation,
Yeah.
there it's dangerous to assume anything on both ends. And when I say dangerous, I mean risky.
Mm.
Um, if you are sending pictures to somebody and you don't have it be conditional, you can have these pictures as long as we're together on condition that you delete it if we break up or if our relationship ends. If you don't specify that, then and you don't ask if the relationship ends, if you don't ask your partner to delete the picture, they might assume that it's okay for them to keep because it was a gift. You
Mm.
gave it to them. And if you assume that they're going to delete the picture, but they assume that they can keep it,
Yeah.
then now you're risking, when I say you, I'm talking about the sender, you're risking the photo still existing. And if you're the receiver, you're risking violating that person's privacy.
Mm.
So I know some people think consent can be implied in a lot of situations, and sometimes it can.
Mm.
But my question is, why risk it when you don't have to?
Yes. Why risk it when you don't have to? Yeah, definitely. Definitely true. So, and if it doesn't automatically end, then what is the ethical or maybe the emotional responsibility does each person carry towards that material?
So that is a good question. Um, if there's risks with not just feeling violation, but also risk that somebody's device could get lost or stolen. or hacked. And so for the person who's keeping the photos or who has the photos on their device, they have a responsibility to protect that data as best they can. And there's no, I'm not aware of any 100% safe protocol. And so you're taking on a level of responsibility that has the potential to do a lot of damage. And if you're the person who's giving the photos, some people see that as intimate and private, as allowing somebody into their home. That's how personal and private it can feel. So the emotional responsibility is potentially huge. It's the safety and protection of somebody's vulnerability. But again, it depends on how that person feels because not everybody feels that way. Some people are okay with knowing that their picture exists out there. Some people like knowing that their pictures exist out there. So again, it really boils down to the individual.
True. Exactly. And I would say definitely it's a powerful point because consent is not kind of one time checkbox, but it's a kind of living agreement. And I think like many listeners will recognize how fragile that can feel because especially when love turns into kind of loss. So yep. And you have also talked about how consent doesn't have to kill the mood, but it can actually enhance it. So, how do we reframe the consent from being a mood spoiler to kind of being a part of the um, erotic experience?
Mhm. Yeah, so, um, I'll I'll use the example of sharing digital content and consent around that
Mhm.
to transition into the broader conversation of how consent can be sexy. So, let's say let's say you have somebody, you're sending nudes, you don't really know exactly how you want to have that conversation around consent without
Mm.
killing the mood.
Yeah.
Well, there's a difference between saying, "You can have this picture, but if we break up,
Mhm.
you need to delete it
Yeah.
because I'm not gonna want you to have it anymore, and I'm not gonna trust you to have it anymore. And I'm sending you this picture because it's for your eyes only.
Mm.
And I want you to have it because it's special. And it's special to me that I share this with somebody who I'm intimate with. And so for as long as we're intimate, I want you to have this." Does that make sense? Like the difference does can you feel the difference between the hey, you can only have this until if we break up versus this is special and it's your eyes only for as long as we're together.
True. I
So,
basically, yeah. Yeah.
so when you're talking about consent, just in general, um,
Mhm.
it can look like really it's two parts. One, you can have a conversation around how do you like to talk about consent? Because everybody kind of has a different approach. And so one person might say, I like to give explicit consent for each time we level up. You know, if I consent to kissing, that does not mean I consent to taking off my clothes. So I want to have that consent be given each new act. And so now If that is established, that partner then can know what the other one wants, and then they can turn it into something sexy. Like, "Ooh, I really wanna take your clothes off right now. Would that be okay? Would you feel okay with that?" Um, and it can be done in a way that's not so formulaic, but it can be done in a way that feels loving and gives exactly what that other person wants. So, some people think having consent be asked over and over can kill the mood. And so if that's the case, you can say, for example, I'm a red light, or I said that wrong. You can say, I'm a green light until I'm a red light. So you don't have to ask every time. You can just go ahead. And if I'm uncomfortable, I'll say so. And so now that person knows if they want to take off their partner's clothes, they can go ahead and do it. And if if their partner is uncomfortable, they can say it. They can have a hand signal, um, but they can agree to those things beforehand, and so then each other knows what the other one likes and wants, and then they can give it to them, and that's hot. And the thing is, both people have to be comfortable with it. So some people would not be okay taking off somebody's clothes unless they ask, even if the other person has already told them it's okay. So it just needs to be talked about, and and it doesn't have to be um a mood killer. It can actually be something that really turns you on because you're talking about these hot things. So I think a part of it is reframing how you look at it. And then another part is actually just getting into it by getting excited about it and knowing what's you're talking about having sex. And that's exciting.
Mhm.
I hope that answered your question.
Exactly. Mm. And um, can you share a real life example, maybe from your coaching practice, where asking for or giving consent actually deepened the connection rather than interrupting it? So, no need to take the name, but I mean, if you can share.
For sure. Um, yeah, one instance comes to mind um, perfectly for this. So we all have these core desires that turn us on n- pretty much no matter what. It's not necessarily an act so much as a feeling. And some people,
Mhm.
I'll say I'll say a lot of times women, but definitely not just women, men too. But women who have a history of maybe being violated, um, and having that be very scary or very unsure of knowing their partner's intent. Like I had a client who beautiful, just I mean, you see this person and she's gorgeous. And it was it was an issue for her, um, that men would sort of feel entitled to her body, or they would show interest in her because they wanted her physically, and she wanted a deep emotional connection. So when I asked her her fantasy, she her fantasy was for somebody to respect her boundaries. That's what turned her on because it made her feel loved, cared about, and it showed that she could trust. And so for her, consent is uh, as good as I'm trying to compare it to
Mm.
like it's hotter than kissing her on the neck or kissing her anywhere. Somebody to ask her for her permission to do something
Yeah.
rocked her world. And that was everything for her. It's all she wanted.
Mm.
It seems so simple,
Yes.
but it's not. People think that it's, I don't know, scary or like we can't talk about it because it's uncomfortable. But I wonder how many women out there are like that. Men too. But if you knew that just asking for permission was going to turn someone on that much, wouldn't you want to ask for their permission? Just seems like something to be excited about, not scared of, or maybe it's scary, but you can lean into it and then get more comfortable as the trust builds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's such a important to reframe because consent as curiosity, as a foreplay, I mean, it makes a space for honesty and anticipation instead of assumption. So
Mhm.
that's way, way true. Yep. And when people experience a kind of breach of trust around intimate content, um, shame often becomes the loudest voice in the room. So, how do you help the clients separate their worth from what happened to them?
How would I handle that as a coach?
Yeah.
How Well, I would examine where that shame comes from, and that could look different for everybody because we all receive similar messages about sex, but our experiences are different. So even if even if we hear the same things from society, maybe we grew up in a family where there's actual fear
Mm.
that we might be disowned by our parents if they found out. Or maybe there's a fear that nobody will ever love us again
Mm.
if they found out. So I would want to look at where that shame comes from, and then I would want to examine that and ultimately help somebody realize that the things we do don't define who we are. And everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does things that maybe they look back on and think they'd do differently if they could go back in time. But really, there's a learning opportunity in everything we do. And if we can change our perspective or appreciate what there was to gain from whatever it is that happens, then the shame can turn into gratitude.
Mm.
It's hard to believe. It's sort of easier when you experience it to understand, but there's a lot to learn from it. And usually the shame is not really based in not reality, but it's not true. And even if it was, let's say you did get disowned by your family, if they found out that there were nude pictures of you.
Mm.
Well, okay, we look at that and we say, what would that reality look like? And we talk about that and we deal with it. I'm not going to pretend with somebody that their fears might not come true because they might. But if they did, okay, then how do you deal? And how do you continue to love yourself? And it's very much possible. So, That's what you do with the shame. You face it.
Right. And for the listeners, if you have to give one uh, suggestion, what that will be?
Um, one like example
Uh, Example, or maybe any suggestion you want to, or maybe advice you want to give to the listeners.
about shame or
Yeah, about shame and the whole everything that we discussed today.
um the more you keep something inside,
Mhm.
the more you try to hide it, the more you try to pretend it doesn't exist or keep it a secret because you feel like it's going to make you unlovable, the more you keep it in, the more it grows and the worse it gets. So, part of getting rid of shame is naming it. And you can't look at it until you name it. You have to give it some kind of space to treat it with love and compassion. So it's scary. There's a reason we want to keep things secret, but the more you keep it secret, the worse it gets.
Mm.
So if there's nobody you trust, then write it down. Write it down and delete it or throw it away if you're scared.
Yeah.
If you have a trusted person, tell them. Tell a pet, tell your dog, tell your cat. Talk to yourself in the mirror. It doesn't matter, but just give it space because that's the only way that you can start to deal with it.
True. True. Very true.
Mhm.
Amazing. So, what a conversation, Mandy. I mean, this has been one of those conversations that lives, that will leave people think long after it ends. And you have reminded us that the consent is not just a kind of boundary, but it's a bridge.
Mhm. Mhm.
That intimacy
Yeah.
and the real intimacy thrives on clarity and not the kind of assumptions. So, uh, definitely. For everyone who is listening, pleasure begins when honesty meets the safety. So, uh, ask, listen, respect. And if something no longer feels right, remember that you have the right to revoke, reclaim, and redefine your yes.
Mhm.
So, dear listeners, if today's conversation spoke to you, follow Mandy, uh, her work at Heart's Desire, and read her blog, Embodying Heart's Desire. And you will find the insights that will challenge comfort and also change the way that you think about the desire. So, Mandy, if someone wants to connect with you, what will be the great medium to connect?
You can email me at mandy@hearts-desire.com. You can send me a message on Instagram at hearts.desire.coaching, or you can contact me through my website and I will get back to you. You can even schedule a consultation right on my website in the scheduling tab. It's free. So if you're interested, check me out.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links into the show notes for the easy reference. And with this hope, this is your host, Avik, and this has been Pleasure Principles. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and stay connected to what feels like truth in your body. So, uh, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.